Hello, I'm Mark DeLuzio. Over the past century, our constitutional republic, grounded in the rule of law, has been transformed into a tyrannical democracy, orchestrated by unelected bureaucrats and globalists. The Constitution is now treated as a suggestion, not the law of the land. Welcome to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God.
Hi, I'm Mark's co-host, Suzette Lawrence. Our intention is to explore the Constitution and discuss how our freedoms and constitutional rights are violated by those very politicians who took an oath on the Bible to uphold it. Learn how the Constitution is the solution to our country's problems. What do we need to do to restore our inalienable and enumerated rights? Class begins now.
Mark DeLuzio and Suzette Lawrence. We are talking about Ben Franklin today.
One of our favorite founders. And he had, my understanding is he's had quite an exciting life, not only professionally, but he just traveled the world. He knew so many people. He engineered support with the French for us, didn't he? Well, anyway, you're going to tell us all about it.
I thought you were in love with Thomas Jefferson, teacher, your buddy. Okay,
I am.
I mean, are you cheating? Are you cheating on him now?
No, but I'm friends with Ben too.
Oh, you're one of those, huh? You're one of those patriots, huh? Well,
I like them all.
Well, you know, the thing about it is these guys were just off the charts brilliant, and they the more we learn about them, the more it's like, now when I go through this with Benny here, okay, he lets me call him that. I cannot believe one man did all this stuff. Now, Thomas Jefferson had a very eclectic life as well, from playing musical instruments to reading Latin to practicing law. He was a lawyer. He did this, he did that. Oh, yeah, by the way, he founded our country. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. Anyway, I mean, when I read about what Franklin has done, I'm looking at this. Now, he was born in 1706. So the time that the Declaration was written by Thomas Jefferson, he was 70 years old, okay? However, everybody says, well, you know, the country was founded by a bunch of old white men. He probably was one of the exceptions of being old, and 70 isn't old, but at the time 70 was really old. Mm-hmm. And so he lived until 1790, age 84. So he was born in Boston on a street called Milk Street. I never heard of it before, but next time I go to Boston, I'm looking it up. And in 1790 he died in Philadelphia. And I remember walking the streets of Philadelphia one day, and I just happened to, oh, whose grave is this? I walked over with Ben Franklin sitting right in front of me. Okay, it was unbelievable. I was like, wait a minute, I'm just walking the streets of Philadelphia here, back when it was safe, and here's Ben Franklin's grave, and people would throw pennies on it, and that kind of thing. So I'm gonna talk a little bit of demographics first, just kind of a little like that kind of stuff. Born, died. I'm going to talk about his appointments that he had. I just can't see how this guy could have done all these appointments. His occupations, his inventions. You're going to be blown away by some of these inventions that this guy came up with. His civil accomplishments and his patriotic accomplishments. And then I've got another section down here, just some fun facts about him. Okay. And like Thomas Jefferson, you're going to do multiple episodes on TJ. One episode probably won't do this guy justice, but we're going to try to get it all in one. And there's just so much to talk about when you start getting into these guys. Very complex life, very interesting life, and we're lucky we had founders like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and Adams and Hamilton and Madison and all the other guys. So anyway, well, he had 3 children and he had 6 siblings. He only went to school to age 10, believe it or not. Wasn't like Thomas Jefferson, who was really staunch in education. He was appointed to the Committee of 5 the drafters of the Declaration. Now we know that Thomas Jefferson wrote it. Matter of fact, I think you said in your last episode that, and by the way, this is episode 36, just in case anybody out there is keeping track. I don't know why they would keep track, but it's episode 36. Okay. Anyway, he was a committee of five, which were the drafters of the Declaration, and that was Adams, Jefferson, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, who's from my home state of Connecticut, and then of course Franklin. Although Jefferson was the one that really led this thing and really wrote the thing. They added their 2 cents here and there. Now Roger
Yeah,
Sherman, yep,
they did the edits because
right,
Jefferson was such a purist and he wrote so elegantly. It would have been easy to like let it go, but they knew that some of his like abolishing slavery, that wasn't going to wash. There was not going to be any consensus there. So yeah, they put these other people that could kind of put the brakes on a bit so that they could gain the consensus of all of the colonies.
yeah, and I remember you saying that Jefferson in the original Declaration abolished slavery.
Oh, big
Uh,
time.
they don't teach that in school, Suzette. They don't teach that to kids in school today.
Nope.
Um, Roger Sherman, by the way, is the only one to sign all four U.S. what they call state papers: the Continental Association, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. He's the only one to sign all four. Okay,
Wow.
and that's from my state of Connecticut. So a little more demographics. Age 17, Franklin proposed to a lady named Deborah Reed. She was only 15.
How old
Uh,
is he?
17.
Oh, that's about right. It was the when was it? Like 17?
Well, I don't know. He was born in 1706, so that would
So
be
that's 1720.
1723.
That's right
Yeah.
on schedule.
Yeah, well, the her mother didn't think so. Okay, and she declined it. So Reed married a potter who fled to Barbados with her dowry. Okay.
Oh no.
Bigamy laws prevented her to remarry. But there was he in 1730 he married her in a common law marriage. Um, Now Franklin was going back and forth to England all this time. Okay, now the thing I don't think people understand is, I've traveled a lot in my life. I've been to 45 countries, 3 million miles. When these guys travel, it takes 6 months to get there. Okay, if they go to England, I mean, think about when you said, "Well, Franklin went from Virginia." I mean, Jefferson went from Virginia back to Philadelphia. That's not a hour and a half plane flight. It takes a long time to get there. For these guys, the way they traveled around was incredible. Okay. Well, anyway, her, she had a Deborah Reed, her Franklin's wife, had a fear of the sea and never went with him to Europe. And she died of a stroke in 1774 when Franklin was in Great Britain. Okay.
Ooh.
So that, obviously, and Franklin, had quite a few affairs and a lot of things going on. Franklin was a ladies' man. Okay. Now, he had an illegitimate son, William, and he really had a bad relationship with him because William was loyal to the King of England. And by the way, that happened a lot back then. Families broken apart because of their loyalty to the king or not. So all that went on as well. So none of this was everybody singing kumbaya, holding hands, and everybody rising up to the rebellion, right? So a little bit of his background there, okay? Now, let's talk about the appointments. I was going to kind of list some of this stuff out, and hopefully you'll get the gravity of how much this guy did. Where did he find time to do it? I don't know. But I'll never, ever accept anybody telling me I don't have time to do that. Never. Okay. So, appointments. He was the first postmaster general in the United States.
Wow.
By the way, that is the way they communicated him. He got that really working. Okay. He was a Philadelphia councilman. He was the first president of the Academy and College of Philadelphia. He was a president of the American Philosophical Society, Speaker of the Penn House in 1764, Pennsylvania House,
Oh.
Speaker of the House. He was the Justice of the Peace in Philadelphia. He was in the Pennsylvania Assembly prior to that in 1751. He was a Freemason starting in 1731 and became the Grand Master of the Masonic Lodge in 1734. He was the first U.S. ambassador to France, and he was, at the time, president of Pennsylvania. I didn't think they had presidents, but they did. The dates on that were 1785 to 1788. So notice it ended right around when we had the Constitution. So think about all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 appointments that he had there. Okay. Now, occupations, a lot of what he did was in the newspaper business. Okay. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But he was the editor and printer of the Philadelphia Gazette. He developed the Poor Richard's Almanac, and he also the Pennsylvania Chronicle, which was known for criticizing the British Crown. Okay. I will get into the newspaper thing a little bit later because there's a fun story about this at the end. Now let's talk about his inventions. This is kind of crazy. He developed anti-counterfeiting techniques for New Jersey's currency. By the way, he was a big proponent of paper money. Jefferson was not. And if you notice in the Constitution, it says, Article 1, Section 8, it says Congress can coin money, but not print money. It says, it didn't say you can't print money. It just says they can coin money.
At that time, just a quick interjection. I know because I was just reading a lot about Jefferson, and when he was in France after their revolution, before they killed Louis and his bride, he was really nervous because they were terribly in debt. This was one of the problems they were having. And I believe they had paper money. They weren't gold backed. They had some kind of.
When you say they, I want to make sure we're clear on what we're talking about. Who's they? France?
Oh, the French.
Okay,
because the French. They had all this debt because they had just had the 7 Years' War.
Yep.
Which, so that created a lot of debt. And this was one of the lessons that Jefferson learned there, was that when you have a government, you end up with these despots. And that was the problem with the kings and the queens. They kind of snapped their fingers and expected miracles to happen. They didn't know some of them didn't know how things worked. They just didn't understand economics. They didn't get it. And they didn't care that the people were starving. So that idea.
Let them eat cake, right?
Right. Like that's what Marie Antoinette said. They were just so disconnected. And that's what Jefferson didn't want, and why he really didn't like the idea of paper money, because it's too tempting for a politician to spend it, to take over a country or
wait a minute, we don't have that problem today, do we? He was right, by the way. He was also against the central bank that we now have. He'd be against the Federal Reserve. That we have 3 other central banks before the Federal Reserve in 1913, but we should get into that even more, because I know you did 2 episodes already on the Federal Reserve. But yeah, he was against Jefferson was against currency, and the reason, you hit on the reason. I mean, because when you expand the money supply, you end up with inflation. That's the definition of inflation. You've got more currency, more of anything is worth less. It goes for money, it goes for tomatoes, it goes for automobiles, it goes for housing and all that, right? It goes for baseball cards. And what Jefferson was afraid of with the gold standard, okay, now we have the gold standard where our money supply was tagged to the gold standard. And what happened was you would bring your gold to a goldsmith and he'd hold your gold for you. So let's just say there's $10,000 of gold in the goldsmiths. I'm just making these numbers up. And he'll give you paper that says, okay, you have $10,000 worth of gold. Now I can come to you, Suzette, and say, hey, I want to buy that cow from you for $1,000. All right. So I give you 1,000. I now have 9,000. The money supply is still 10,000. But then the goldsmith said, hey, wait a minute. If I issue more paper against this $10,000 worth of gold, so he issues another $10,000 worth of paper. Now your gold certificates that were worth 1,000 are only worth 500. That's what Jefferson was afraid of. He was afraid of how the paper would have been used. And that's exactly what's happening today, although it's electronic. We don't, that's not the paper currency. Anyway, um, but part of the problem is counterfeiting, because if you counterfeit, you're going to create inflation. Okay. Plus you're breaking the law. So let's talk about his inventions. His inventions are developed the anti-counterfeiting techniques for
Wow.
New Jersey's currency. I couldn't figure out why New Jersey. Um, he chartered and named the Gulf Stream current. He was able to pick up the currents in the Gulf Stream, and he actually named it the Gulf Stream current, which
How
is the
did he
current that
know that? How did he do
this guy was wait till you hear some of the other stuff he did.
that?
Okay, I
Okay.
have no idea how he did it unless he stood out in the middle of the ocean, but that's just the Gulf Stream that goes all the way up into England, right? Up into Europe.
Right.
Now the lightning rod he developed, okay, and he did have kite experiences. It's not all that documented, but it led to the lightning rod. And again, if you don't know what a lightning rod is, I had one in Connecticut because I lived up on a very high hill, and the lightning would hit the lightning rod on top of your house, and it was connected to a wire that would be grounded right into the ground. That way, your house doesn't get hit with the lightning. Okay. Um, he
Brilliant.
developed. Now, I don't know if you have those on. You might have progressives on, like I do. He developed the bifocal. Okay. He developed. I've never heard of this before, but the glass harmonica. You know what that is? It's a
Mm-mm.
bunch of glass discs that you spin with your hand to make a sound. Okay. Of course, the Franklin stove he invented, and that had very special ways of, the flue had one of the problems with burning, wood in your home and all that is the smoke and everything else. This particular stove handled the air current so that it was more efficient in that regard. Okay, so they call that the Franklin stove. He developed the urinary catheter.
He did?
You'd like that. You're a medical person, right? You're a medical background.
That's very interesting.
Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if you ever had to use one on a patient, but uh, you know, that's our boy Ben. Okay.
That's amazing. Oh yeah, you use them all. We used to use them all the time. Yeah.
Well, um, he developed a principle of refrigeration. He observed that on a hot day, you stay cooler in a wet shirt if there's a breeze, and that led to the principle of refrigeration. Okay, I'm not done. He discovered the relationship between color and heat absorption.
Hmm.
So, you know how black absorbs more heat and white reflects it, right?
Yeah.
But doesn't absorb it? That's Ben. That's our boy Ben. Okay. I think they named a rice after him too. Didn't they name it like a rice? No, I'm sorry. I'm getting off track here. He he discovered that water is a good conductor of electricity, but very low when it turns to ice. This is what this guy did. Okay. He noted that oil from the cook in the ship that he was on would calm the waters for several yards. So there's a property with oil. I don't tell that to the climate change people when they want to.
What? What now? He that
Oil would calm the water in terms of waves and everything else when there's oil on the water.
so how did they do that, I wonder?
Hey, now
Would you know?
he also calculated the population in America, and he predicted it was doubling every 20 years, which was the
Wow.
fastest on Earth at the time. He inspired Adam Smith in his studies of economics which, you know, Adam Smith in 1776 wrote The Wealth of Nations, which you have a copy of, Suzette, and so do
I
I.
do. I was
Yeah.
just looking for it. It's over by my reading
Remember,
table.
Adam Smith is the invisible
Everybody,
hand.
all
Yeah.
of the founders were reading him. Jefferson read him. He was one of Jefferson loved him too.
Well, you know, the
I,
thing about Adam Smith was you can argue he was the father of capitalism and the invisible hand. He said, let capital find its place. You know, you're not going to put money into a buggy whip company because there's no more buggies. Okay.
right.
So let capital find its natural place. And when the government gets involved, of course, and they try to mess with the market, they mess up that invisible hand. Now, this may sound a little crazy to you. Do you ever do a pro and con list?
No, I
Plus
don't know.
minus list? Like, you're going to make a
Oh,
decision.
sure, sure.
Should I move to Boston? Let's do the pros, let's do the cons.
Yep, I do have done those many times.
Who hasn't, right? He developed that. Okay. So far, you used a catheter in the pros and cons list and didn't even know it was Benny. Okay.
And we had a potbelly stove, a Franklin stove, and in our family room for years.
I wouldn't let Thomas Jefferson know about this. I knew something was up. I knew it. Hey, this is my favorite though. Okay. He developed what's called the long arm, what we today call the granny claw. You know what a granny claw is?
Oh, those like the extended reach in those machines.
Yeah, yeah. Because my
How
mom had one. She
interesting.
would reach on top of the shelf and she grabbed something from the top shelf and bring it down. We have one. I use it all the time to get the ball under the stove for my dog. When it goes, it's called the granny claw. He invented the granny claw. Okay. I don't know. Now, he developed what's called 13 virtues. Okay. That's kind of famous. I don't have the virtues listed here, and I'm not going to um, list them out and talk about the virtues, but if you want to look those up, he developed these 13 virtues of life. And he admitted, he said, hey, look, I didn't always follow them faithfully. Okay. Uh, but he
No
did develop
kidding.
the 14 virtues.
Something to aspire to, right?
And like I said, he invented the glass harmonica, but he also played the harp, violin, guitar, and he composed music. Okay.
Wow.
And last but not least, and this one here blows me away. He developed a phonetic alphabet. It was called A Scheme for a New Alphabet and a Reformed Mode of Spelling. He thought the letters C, J, Q, W, X, and Y were redundant, and he wanted to get rid of them. Here's a guy saying, hey, I'm going to get rid of the alphabet. Okay, part of the alphabet. And he substituted 6 new letters for sounds that he felt lacked a letter of their own. So he was a warrior for letters. Okay, he was fighting for those letters that he didn't feel were represented. So this guy was all about equity, and but this alphabet never caught on. Okay, now somewhere along the line, I think I don't have this down here, but I seem to recall he wanted to have the turkey as the national bird.
I do remember that about him.
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, thank God that didn't happen, because otherwise we wouldn't have Thanksgiving. Actually, Washington, through proclamation, declared Thanksgiving. As the first proclamation I think ever declared was Thanksgiving on was it third Thursday of November?
Third
Whatever it is.
Thursday in
Yeah.
November. Yep.
That's some of his inventions. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, these were really learned men with,
Yep.
I mean, they were extraordinary for a reason, right? They weren't this was not your average Joe.
No, but let's go back to what I said earlier, Suzette. He only went to school until age 10. Okay.
Yep. But he never stopped learning. And he
That's the
obviously
key.
was gifted. He had an amazing sense of observation. Could put 2 and 2 together.
He observed things that nobody else did. Right, exactly. Now, civic accomplishments. Let's talk about those. He chartered the first hospital in the colonies. It was called Pennsylvania Hospital. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He organized the colony's first homeowners insurance company.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
They could use him in California right now.
He needed a lot of things in California.
Oh, by the way, Thanksgiving is the fourth Thursday,
Yeah, it is the fourth. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
not the third.
You're
Okay.
right. The library company. Okay, he formed a library company, and he was also the librarian for a brief period of time. Okay, he organized and developed Philadelphia's first fire department,
Wow.
and he was the founder and first president of the University of Pennsylvania.
That's amazing. So, like, he was just a very skilled leader,
Over one third of the Declaration
inventor.
signers, yeah, over one third of the Declaration signers were somehow affiliated with University of Pennsylvania. Now you got to remember, Philadelphia University of Philadelphia is an Ivy League school today, and it's the business school is Wharton, where President Trump went. Okay,
Oh yeah, Penn is. It's a great school.
it's a great finance school. Yeah, yeah. Every business school has their different thing. Now, by the way, I didn't get into all of the honors he was given. He was an honorary degree at Harvard and in all these different schools, and honorary degrees from different countries. I didn't even list those here.
Wow.
Okay, I probably should have. Now, let's talk about his patriotic accomplishments. He's only one to sign the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Treaty of Paris. Now, the Treaty of Paris basically was the treaty where England relinquished its rights on when they lost the Revolutionary War. The Treaty of Paris was that treaty that said, "Okay, we're a sovereign nation. Leave us alone, King George." Right? He argued against slavery, but he did own slaves, just like Jefferson. Both of them argued against slavery. He became an active abolitionist. He promoted education and the integration of blacks. Now, I
This
think
is something, this is huge because I don't think we fully appreciate the violence that these many people felt would be that their people would be attacked, their slaves would be attacked if they freed them. This was very common, or someone else would take them. So a lot of
well,
times they made
yeah,
sure that they like, if they knew it was wrong, so they did their best to provide well for that person and to make sure that they were skilled. Some people went as far as to educate their slaves so that they were reading and doing math, and they had little schools on their plantation, and their kids would go to school with the slave kids. I mean, so there were, not all slave owners were barbaric, although the practice in itself is. But because you see this, like when you read histories, especially on like Lewis Gates, he does Dr. Gates does a show called Finding Your Roots, and he does this DNA testing. And oftentimes, the first time a Black woman owned property or a Black family owned property, it was because the person that owned them gave them the property.
right.
When they died, they gave them, okay, you can have that lower
By the way,
60.
I believe Washington did the same,
Yeah,
and
so
some of
they
the
did a
founding fathers.
lot.
Yeah.
They
Well,
tried
so
to ameliorate, they
talk
tried to ameliorate the injustice.
talk to me about what you said though under the Thomas Jefferson episode, which was episode 35. Um, you indicated that in some cases they couldn't let them free
No, it
for
was
their own good.
what that was their concern, because if you were a slave and your owner let you go, and you were, let's say you were Black as night, okay, even if you had a great skill, someone else could claim you as theirs.
Yep.
So unless, and this is why Jefferson, I'm guessing this was a practice at the time for the mixed race slaves. They were, sometimes by the time they were 21, they would free them. They would make sure they had a skill. They made sure they could read, they could do math, that they were able to cope with the world. And sometimes they'd even find a place for them. So they could be a blacksmith somewhere or a seamstress or something. But if you didn't have any skills, if you were a field slave, it was rough, because house slave, it was different, because a lot of times the mixed race slaves would be in the house. They were the cook. They were the ladies' maids. They were working close to the family, taking care of the children, because they essentially were relatives. I mean, that was the case in the Jefferson household, and then in Patsy, Jefferson's wife, and her childhood home, certainly the case. Yep. So, these are your relatives essentially. And so, yeah, it wasn't as simple as just turning taking someone and letting them go, and now they're going to have a happy life. No, the guy down the street's going to nab them, beat them within an inch of their life, and for escaping. And you, as the owner, would be frowned upon. Like, what are you doing? Why are you letting these people go? You're going to give you're going to give our guys the wrong idea. They're going to, you know what I mean? They were always terrified.
When a lot of these woke kids today criticize slavery, and don't get me wrong, it's wrong. Okay.
Oh, it's horrible.
Okay.
It's
but
heinous.
When they don't understand the whole dynamic of that time, I just look at them and say, you want to know something? You never would have signed the Declaration, because it took so many guts to do that. You signed a death warrant when they did that. They signed a death warrant. And by the way, you would have owned slaves. Okay.
A lot of people did. And this is, some of my Black friends have gotten really mad at me, and I had to stop talking about it, but I'll mention it here. There were Black people who owned slaves. And this is something Lewis Gates brought up in that thing, like this one Black person, I can't remember who he was, but his family was Black, and they owned slaves. Yep. And this guy was mortified. And you can appreciate why, because he didn't learn that in school. He was indoctrinated to believe that only mean white people owned slaves and treated them all badly. And that wasn't always the case. And of course, being owned is in and of itself about as bad as it gets. But being owned and being mistreated.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of mistreatment. But, let's not forget, too, that it was Black people who sold Black people into slavery.
Africa, the Africans. Right? The Maasai of all people.
Right.
The Maasai
there
were
was
big
also
traders.
more white slaves at that time than there were Black slaves. Okay.
Yeah, the Barbary Coast. Are you familiar with that whole Barbary Coast thing? Yeah. And it was,
and by the way, all of Europe, except for England, all of Europe had slaves. It was a common thing back then. It was just what you did.
There's a place, I think it's like, I can't remember the name of it. It's on the coast of Africa, like where Africa kind of pops out. And there was a slave auction there. And the Maasai would bring they would raid villages and bring them there, because all through time people have been trying to enslave each other. I mean, This is unfortunately the case. And they would bring their slaves there, and then I think it was Ghana but I'm not sure. And because the white guys would show up, they couldn't go inland for 24 hours without risking malaria or yellow fever. I mean, they had no immunity. If you were a white guy in Africa, chances of you surviving more than 3 days was it was unlikely. A lot of it. I know a lot of people.
I'm going there in the first quarter, so be careful.
Will well, I'm sure they'll get you all. We'll get your immune system in great shape for that trip.
Oh yeah, no, I'm used to that. Don't worry. I go to India quite a
But you know
bit.
what I'm
So,
saying? Like, I'm not saying all white people that went there died because they got infected, but that was a big
right,
issue. That was,
right.
it was very common. So very risky.
Well, look, he was a active abolitionist. Like I said, he promoted education and integration of blacks to the extent he could, based on what you just explained to us. Um, when he signed the Declaration, now remember, as you indicated in a previous podcast episode, they signed a death warrant, and he had a very famous quote, Suzette. It said, "Yes, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately."
That was the case.
You know?
They
Okay.
had, they were very, I think Patrick Henry was the only I'm sure there may have been other traders, but I know he was it Patrick Henry? Yeah, Patrick Henry.
Traitor?
That
No, no. You mean Benedict Arnold?
Benedict Arnold.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Benedict Arnold.
He spearheaded, you mentioned the Stamp Act earlier. He spearheaded the repeal. He was the guy that really got the Stamp Act moving, okay, to repeal it. Now, he was going back and forth to England quite a bit over there. And remember what the Stamp Act was? The King of England imposed a tax on every piece of paper, whether it's books, newspapers, doesn't matter what, right? Contracts, you got to pay a tax on every single piece of paper. And the Stamp Act was designed to pay for the 7 Year War. And
Yeah.
actually, Franklin argued with the King of England, saying, "Hey, look, we put as many men in that war as you did, 25,000 troops. Okay, we did our share, right?" And so that's the Stamp Act is what really started the movement. Now, it took quite a few years before they wrote the Declaration. Okay, but the Stamp
Mark,
Act, yep,
not to interrupt you mid-sentence, I know it's
no,
terrible
it's
to
okay.
do, but just like for our listeners, the 7 Years' War was the French fighting the English in British North America. So
Right,
we have, remember the Louisiana Purchase was Jefferson bought that whole, doubled the size of the country, buying that land from the French. But at the time, we would have called that the Indian Wars. And
right.
this is
The
for
French Indian War, right? That's right.
George Washington. In Europe, they called it the 7 Years' War.
Hmm.
But we often refer to it as the Indian Wars that George Washington was um, such a leader in. And I mean, he was a
Yes,
kid too.
yes,
I mean, he was another one of
yes.
these kids that just couldn't be stopped. He didn't know he couldn't do it,
Well,
so he did it.
by the way, that Stamp Act, and I think we talked about in another episode, but we were very patient people, and it took, I don't know, was it 10 years? I think, until we wrote the Declaration. But finally, when you read the Declaration, it's kind of like saying, "Hey, look, we petitioned you, you ignored us. We petitioned you, you ignored us. Okay, now we mean business." Okay, but the Stamp Act was really the proverbial straw, if you will, that broke the camel's back. So now, what else did he do? Patriotic accomplishments. Patriotic. Spearheading the Stamp Act was a really big deal, right? By the way, and that was Franklin. He designed the Great Seal of the United States along with Adams and Jefferson. Okay, yeah, just a little thing.
What
He
did
screwed.
Jefferson want on the seal?
What did he want on the seal?
Yeah, did they ever put that? I don't think it's on the seal, but didn't he?
No, no. We had that in the last.
It
I forget
was
what it was.
rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what, and his friends, see, he had very good friends that wanted to protect him and had a sense of, no, you
You're
can't
talking
really do
Jefferson now,
that.
right? You're talking Jefferson.
Yes, Jefferson.
Yes.
So, and Ben Franklin was one of his good friends that kind of took him under his wing and kind of was like, you don't want to go there, don't go
Mhm.
that far, you know. Anyway,
Well, now one of the most unbelievable things he did was he secured French aid from to fund us with arms for the American Revolution. Okay, And he did that with a guy named Silas Dean. And it's interesting because Silas Dean Highway in Weathersfield, Connecticut, where my wife grew up. Everybody said, "Oh, who's Silas Dean?" And there's a Silas Dean house right there in Weathersfield. And they went over, and he was an ambassador. He was a diplomat. This guy, Franklin, got involved in all kinds of. He got invited to these parties. Got to meet all these important, famous people. The guy was just off the charts, popular and brilliant and sought after. But he went to France. Now, we all know the French and the English didn't all care for each other all that much, and the French were more than happy to help us. Okay. Um, and then he proposed a plan of union for the colonies. Many of the provisions found their way into the Articles of Confederation, which predated the Constitution, and they also found their way into the Constitution. So this guy. I'm just looking at this guy's life, and it's like, how did one man do all this stuff? Okay, I don't know. Okay, fun facts. We all know he's on the $100 bill. Some say that was because he came from meager upbringings. He didn't come from wealth. Okay, he came from lower means, and him being on the $100 bill represents the American dream. Okay, that's and again, I guess when they did that, $100 was worth something back then. I don't know.
Oh, $100 used to be a lot of money.
I
It was
know, I
so
know,
much money. It was,
I
I
know.
mean, it really was a lot of money.
You know
Now,
why it's you know how you know it's not now? When you go to an ATM, an option is you can get $100 bills. That's now it's not worth crap, right? Now, the papers of Benjamin. Do you know there's over 30,000 letters and documents?
wow.
30,000. Okay. No wonder he's against the Stamp Act.
Wow.
But
Good, good
can you
point.
imagine 30,000 of anything? I mean, it's
No,
unbelievable.
I feel good. I just got two letters and a card off this week, a card yesterday, and two letters to my nephews are in college. And I
And you
feel,
probably
and I'm
typed it on
actually,
your computer.
no, I handwrite the
Oh,
letters.
good for
I
you.
handwrite the letters. And the reason is they can't read cursive. They are raised on block letters, right? Because
Oh, you're
they,
torquing them, aren't you? That's what you're doing.
well, I'm trying to ask them to stretch a little bit,
Now I mean 30,000. I mean, remember that's all handwritten, right?
30,000.
Yeah. Okay, now here's a funny story. Okay. His brother, James, ran a newspaper called the New England Current.
Wow.
And I'm not sure, I think he was young. He was young at this time, but he was denied the chance to write a letter in the Current. So he adopted a uh, uh, a fake name called Silence Dogwood. And Silence Dogwood was a middle-aged widow. James and the readers of the newspaper were unaware that it was Franklin all along. And he was writing all kinds of letters to the paper that were really causing a stir. Okay. And his brother didn't even know it. Okay. Now he was also a guy that went over to England, and he was part of a Hellfire Club. Hellfire Club was a high society club, and they might have done some immoral things sometimes, if you know what I mean. Okay, but
Mhm.
as he related to these people, they thought he was a spy. Okay, they thought he was a spy, and maybe he was for us. He was an avid chess player. I think you'll probably like this one, Suzette. At age 16, he became a vegetarian.
Oh, interesting. I wonder
Yep.
why he did that.
He said the consumption of meat was unprovoked murder, but there was times he ate fish, but he was a vegetarian. Okay.
Oh, I did not know that Benjamin Franklin was a vegetarian. Now, I wonder if he was, well, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to.
Well, I mean, yeah, I just learned that myself when I kind of did this research, and at age 16, by the way. Okay.
Well,
Uh,
if you've got to go out and kill the chicken, like they weren't going to the grocery store, you've got to go out and wring their neck, kill them, pluck them. prepare them. That's very different, if you have to kill the animal to eat it.
Was Walmart further away from him? I thought they didn't have one in Philadelphia at the time. Okay.
Well, and they had butchers, but a lot of people did that stuff. There wasn't a woman in Philadelphia that did her own cooking that didn't know how to prepare at least a chicken or a rabbit or, small game. They may not have been butchering hogs, but they knew how to
Well,
kill it.
it's interesting you said, just an aside for a minute, because you bring up a good point. So much of their time back then, your average person, the average family, was just about surviving. You had to go down and get water. You had to, cook. You had to hunt. You had to, and
Chop the wood, keep the
chop
fire,
the wood, keep your, yeah,
bake the
exactly.
bread, get the kids, wash the clothes,
But
make
like
the
now,
clothes.
oh, are you hungry? Just go to your refrigerator, right? It's in there.
Right. Or
You run out,
or
you
call
drive to Walmart,
somebody.
or you call Amazon, or you call your grocery store on your phone. So
Yep.
times have changed, but so much back then, it was so important for the family to stay together for many different reasons, and everybody had their role. Okay.
Yep.
Now, this was an interesting one. So after the war was over and all that, and Franklin was going back and forth to Europe quite a bit. He returned from France with an unexplained shortage of £10,000 in congressional funds. In response to a question from a member of Congress about this, Franklin quoted the Bible and he quipped, "Muzzle not the ox that treadeth out his master's grain." And what that means, because quite frankly, I had to look it up. Don't complain that the ox ate some of the grain as he's enriching his master.
Right.
Okay,
It takes
that's it.
we would say it takes money to make money. You're going there asking for money, to help he was there asking the French to help, right? In the revolution. Was that his?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's what this meant. But all he's saying is that, hey, look, I think if I were to read it correctly, if I go back to muzzle not the ox, if it wasn't for the ox and all the work he did, and maybe in some sense, he's doing more than his share for our country. Okay, so muzzle not the ox that treadeth on out his master's grain. I think that's kind of what he was saying. So anyway, the end of that story was the missing funds were never mentioned again in Congress. Okay.
Well, and the other thing, I watched a documentary about John Adams. It was the John Adams documentary, and they're in
Yeah,
Paris.
I saw it. Yeah.
He's yeah, and he's like hanging out with queens
Oh yeah.
and kings and countesses and all of these really, really wealthy people that he has to seduce to get the money. Like he has to make friends with them. They have to like him. They have to think that, he's representing the United States. So he needed money. He couldn't show up as a pauper.
No.
He was
No.
I don't know how much money he personally had. Probably not. I don't know that he had that much.
Not he had the equivalent of $4,000 when he died. I think I got it in here somewhere, which today is worth like $121,000. Okay.
So that's
So
not bad, but it's nothing, certainly not the kind of opulence that people that don't even know what
no,
money is.
no.
If you're always living on the community purse, you're not necessarily paying attention. Yeah, you just didn't. That was the problem in France. I mean,
Yep.
people were starving and the king had no clue.
When he died, 20,000 people attended his funeral.
Wow.
Okay. So let's sum this up because I think this is the kind of neat part about this. Ian Roberts Jacques Turgot said of him, he snatched lightning from the sky and the scepter from the tyrants. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
And at age 22 in 1728, Franklin wrote what he hoped would be his own epitaph. The body of B. Franklin printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here food for worms. But the work shall not be wholly lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more perfect edition, corrected and amended by the author. That was his.
So was he saying that he expected Jesus to be resurrected in heaven? Or is he saying that he thought that once he died that he could remake himself?
I kind of think
He had to meet
the
Jesus.
former. I would think. I think the former, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
he had to
interesting.
know that he would be resurrected and restored. And and people of great faith often think, they kind of give up on themselves on earth, planning on, I'll be resurrected in the perfect body in heaven, so I'm not going to worry about it now.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting idea.
When Washington became president, I believe in 1789, right? And he died in 17. Franklin died in 1790. Okay.
Mhm.
He was too old and too ill ever to become president. And the saying on his, and matter of fact, we're going to call this episode Ben Franklin, the only president of the United States who was never president of the United States. Pretty fitting.
He did so much for us.
He was
Did so much.
incredible. I get blown away by a guy like this, who did all this stuff, and and also they didn't have the communication, they didn't have transportation. I mean, the energy they must have had to be able to. Your boyfriend TJ too, Thomas Jefferson. Okay, I mean, what this guy did. I mean, look at how eclectic these guys were, and also how much they packed into their life. And when I hear people criticize them that barely made it out of school and is home living in their basement with their mother, are you kidding me? You're criticizing the founding fathers?
Well, yes.
Wow.
And that because they just don't know. That's what I think. I think they really don't know. They don't understand. They've been told something so often they think it's the truth.
That's true.
And that is like if you're savvy, and I think I am, I think I'm pretty good about like sorting the wheat from the shaft. When I'm listening to someone, sometimes I'll think, well, I'm not arguing with this person. Number one, they're so off base, it's not funny. I mean, and number two, they just don't know. And they're not really that interested because you've got a phone, you can check anything. You make a mistake on when Thanksgiving is, even though we do it every year.
Hey, wait a minute.
Between the two of us, we've been doing it for
Just for that, I'm gonna
149.
celebrate it on the third week, not the fourth week. Okay.
But all you have to do is look in your phone.
Yeah, well,
And
that's a
there's some
problem too, right? Because I mean, how are people? I mean, there's so much crap out there on the internet. You know darn well.
go
You're,
down
you're
about
not,
10. You to go down, you don't take the first one. You go down and you use a different search engine. I use DuckDuckGo for a lot of stuff
yeah,
because
but
they include other information, other newspapers. They're like they have a lot of European newspapers.
well, it's the ability though to be able to discern facts and what I call causation and correlation, right? So if I said to you, 100% of all auto accidents last year involve cars with black tires. So don't drive a car with black tires. Okay. So I correlated that falsely, right? Or, you know, 100% of men on death
Right.
row had milk as a child. So don't feed your kid milk as a child, right? Or maybe a little bit more clever would be, and being a health professional that you are, a study was done that said people who regularly eat yogurt live 5 years longer. So people say, hey, I'm going to go out and buy, I'm 500 pounds, but I'm going to go out and eat yogurt. I'm going to live 5 years longer. No, you're not. You're not going to live that long. The people who eat yogurt maybe are also exercising and they're not drinking, they're not smoking, they're not doing this, and they're eating right, right? That's why they live longer. It has nothing to do with just yogurt. Okay.
It's part of a program, perhaps. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to make those connections. For sure.
But we don't teach critical thinking today. And so when you see a headline, I just saw one the other day. What the heck was it? It was a really false headline. Geez, I can't remember what it was, but I, I remember commenting on LinkedIn that that headline is absolutely misleading. Okay. Oh, I know. It had to do with consumer confidence in housing. That's what it said. Consumer confidence in housing is rising or at an all-time high. And what it was a survey that asked homeowner or potential homeowners, do you think interest rates are going to go down? And they said yes. So they translated that into consumer confidence. You see what I'm saying? And
Yes.
and so there's a lot of dishonesty too in the
Yeah.
press. And in our globalist communist manifesto episode, we talked about the fact that controlling the press, control of communications, and I think it was Lenin that said, "A lie told often enough will become the truth." Okay,
Oh,
so
yes. This is propaganda 101. They teach
anyway,
it
I
at
don't. Yeah,
NYU. And when the professor at NYU identified the propaganda during the mess, I'll just call it the mess, of 2020, 2021, he recognized the propaganda. And he brought this up to his students and he was canceled
yeah,
just like that.
yeah.
He'd been there for decades. And I think he's on he does a podcast and he talks about it because he taught propaganda, how to recognize it, who uses it, when you use it, why it's used, where it's used. So he, of course, right away got the picture. And propaganda is a narrative that directs you to a certain outcome where communication does not. Honest communication is just honest communication. You make your own decision. You interact with it. It hits you the way it hits you, and then you process that in your own mind. But propaganda actually is designed to lead you to a specific conclusion. So it's a very
Yeah.
different, it's a kind of a low frequency communication technique. That's very effective, but very low people use it. You shouldn't need propaganda. You should just be able to tell
Well,
the truth.
when you don't have the truth behind you, you have to revert to that. So that's just how it works. But well, that's our boy Ben Franklin. And by the way, just one more thing. When you go back to your TJ, when the students
Yes.
tore down his statue at the University of Virginia, that's a school he founded. Okay. I know you're going to talk about that in upcoming episodes on Thomas Jefferson. It
Yep.
just blows me away how ignorant we are of these people. So
It is.
this is why we're doing these, right? You did Thomas Jefferson. You'll probably do a couple more on him. There's so much to talk about. There's so much more to talk about with Franklin, but maybe enough. I'll move on to another founder. But we need to educate people on the founders, Adams and Hamilton and Madison, and let's go down the list of all the great ones there. Washington. It's just absolutely mind-boggling that, and we are all benefiting from their sweat and in some cases their blood. So anyway, Suzette, this is Ben Franklin.
Thank you so much. It's been great to get to know him a little better.
Yeah, Ben, and this episode, which is episode 36, we're going to call it Ben Franklin, the only president of the United States who was never president of the United States. So for Suzette Lawrence, who's got a date tonight, I think, with Thomas Jefferson. I'm not sure. Do you have one a date tonight? I'm not sure.
I actually am going to be, I'm listening to a lot about him. I'm actually focused on Sally Hemings right now, which is like, it's a fascinating story, and listening to her relatives. And It's interesting because some of them have a lot of hostility and others are very laid back and cool. They're like, oh yeah, this is, it's just, hits people different.
Well, you let us know how that goes. Our next one, maybe we'll do another one on TJ. And this was episode 36. And for Suzette Lawrence in Sedona and Mark DeLuzio in Scottsdale, Arizona, we will see you guys next time.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us and listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God, where we hold that strict adherence to the Constitution is the solution to most of our country's problems.
You can find other episodes on our website at 1787solution.com, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most other platforms. We're your hosts, Mark DeLuzio and Suzette Lawrence. Until next time, may God bless you and may God bless America.